Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast. Position group breakdowns continuing again this week. Trace is with me tonight, and it's time to talk about those herd wide receivers and tight ends, the receiving unit, if you will. As we talked about with Stephen in the Western Kentucky receiving unit, Phil still ranks the Marshall unit, tied for first, of course, with Western Kentucky and North Texas. Kind of surprising, Trace, but also here's a little bit of a differentiator between the Western Kentucky ranking and the Marshall ranking, according to Phil Steele. Marshall lands nationally at number 51, but Western didn't crack that top list of, individual rankings, I guess. They're close enough in the conference, but I guess there's enough teams in between Marshall and Western to where one got nationally ranked by Phil Steele and the other one did not. Interesting note that we might add, seeing as how Marshall lost some pretty big weapons through the transfer portal in the offseason. So we'll talk about all that. A little bit of a difference in roster makeup. According to the Herd Zone roster, there are 15 wide receivers on the current Marshall roster and 7 tight ends. Just a little bit of a differentiation from Western Kentucky. Western had 17 wide receivers and 5 tight ends. So not a whole lot of differentiation, but it gives you a little insight of how the rosters are made up a little bit. Of course, we know that Marshall has relied heavily on the tight ends, and they utilize them almost better than anybody else in the country. I mean, what was a couple of years ago, their leading 2 or 3 receivers were all tight ends. So but we know we're not there anymore. This is a different animal now. They weren't, Xavier Gaines was the second, I think, leading receiver on the team last year. But, most of the guys leading the way are wide receivers. Let's talk about the portal. We go portal out and portal in. Marshall lost more than they gained in the transfer portal. 4 guys from the wide receiver room transferring out, 1 guy from the tight end room transferring out, but only 1 transferring in. Portal out, Brock Thompson, big play ability, dinged up a little bit last year, didn't appear in a ton of games, but a big weapon nonetheless. Off to Purdue. Artie Henry has made some big plays for the Herd over the past couple of seasons. He's gone as well, off to UVA. Wide receiver Jahari Patterson transfers out, goes to East Carolina, and Jason Heller out. No destination spot for Mr. Heller, according to 24/7 Sports. Only tight end to transfer out was Logan Clark. He was only there with the Herd for maybe a year. I think he was JUCO transfer or something like that 2 years ago, and kind of in and out. And only 1 guy from the transfer portal coming in, and that's Jaden Harrison. We'll get into his stats and measurables in a little bit, coming over from Vanderbilt. Marshall does return its top 2 receivers, Trace, in Corey Gamage and the aforementioned Xavier Gaines. And we're going to talk about a lot of these guys here in a minute. But what are your thoughts on how the offseason really has gone for the Herd in these particular position groups?
Well, I mean, it's definitely taken a little bit of a hit, like you said. I mean, losing a couple quality receivers there, with Henry and Thompson. I mean, they're good players, but that's why it surprises me that he has them in the 50s nationally. Is that what you said? Like
51, yeah, number 51.
See, like that's kind of crazy to me. Like, I mean, I would have expected that maybe if they had those 2 guys back, maybe he did that before they made the moves. I don't know, but that's a little surprising. I mean, that shows how highly though he probably does think of guys like Corey Gamage and Talit Keaton, because those guys are expected to have big years, especially Gamage. I mean, he could really just take off this year, I think. And I mean, they got some other guys, there that I think will make plays as well. I mean, Willie Johnson's still there. he's never going away. So, I mean, they have a pretty solid unit. And couldn't tie it in. I mean, it's pretty solid. It's a pretty stout unit. I mean, anytime you got Xavier Gaines on the field, you got a better chance of doing something. I mean, the guy's just Mr. Versatility, and all that. And, you got a couple guys behind him that have been around for a while. Devin Miller, Garrett Morrell, who's still here too. So, I mean, they got tight end. I think they're in really good shape. Wide receivers, I think they're in pretty good shape, but they're not in nearly as good of a shape, as they would have been if Brock Thompson and Artie Henry wouldn't have transferred out. But, I mean, that's just part of it nowadays. You just never know. I mean, that could happen any given day.
Well, I think something weighing into those the rankings a little bit, at least for Phil, is the fact that Thompson and Henry combined only played in 10 games combined last year. So look at, as fans, as Herd fans, the fan base knows what these guys are capable of. But as far as what the numbers were, and as a percentage of the production and the number of games they appeared in, it just wasn't there. So maybe, from from Phil Steele's perspective, it's not as big of a loss as it probably actually will be. True. Or we hope that it won't be, but that it could be. Let's put it that way. And of course, there is a lot of speculation. I mean, you return Corey Gammage, he's the number one receiver from a year ago. So, you got that there. He's got the build. He's got the body. Corey Gammage lands on Phil Steele's fourth team All-Conference USA preseason team. You mentioned Willie Johnson. He's been there forever, and but there are some guys. Talit Keaton's made a few plays here and there. He had 17 catches last year, but after that, it's really like, okay, who's going to do something? At least from the wide receiver position. Now, tight ends we'll get to in a minute. So let's talk about the measurables. Let's talk about who's on the roster, and let's talk about what they did last year so we can start to get a feel of this unit as a whole. Now, we're just talking wide receivers right now, and then we'll touch on tight ends in the latter half of the episode. So leading the way, of course, said his name already 2 or 3 times, is Corey Gammage, a 6'4", 220-pound redshirt sophomore, 35 catches last year, 409 yards, leads the way for the Herd, just outpacing Xavier Gaines by a handful of yards. 4 touchdowns for Gammage with 11.7 yards per catch average. Redshirt sophomore, Trace, showed signs of real game breakability type talent last year. And for whatever reason, couldn't stay consistently on the field and couldn't put it all the way together. Man, if it comes together this year, look out. 6'4", 220. I mean, you can't teach that. You can't teach 6'4", 220. You can teach route running. You can improve speed. You can improve your ability to make a catch, but you just can't teach that kind of size. Willie Johnson, the 6 foot, 178-pound red shirt senior, 18 catches last year, 268 yards, a couple touchdowns, 14.9 yards per catch for Willie. We know Willie, what was that play they just seemingly kept running last year, and it worked for, 30, 40 yards a clip. So we know Willie hasn't slowed down in his old age. We say that tongue-in-cheek. He's been there like 17 years, but he has certainly not lost a step. Talit Keaton, uber-talented return man, looking to make his name as far as wide receivers go in a little bit of a bigger way this year. Had 17 catches last year, 175 yards and a touchdown, good for 10.3 yards per reception. He's coming in at 6'1", 184 pounds. He's also just a redshirt sophomore. So think about that. Gammage, Keaton, both redshirt sophomores. A lot of the guys we're going to talk about here in this first initial group of guys that have made a catch in a Herd uniform, are either sophomores or redshirt sophomores, with the exception of Willie Johnson and Stone Scarcelli, who's a redshirt junior, but he just had 1 catch for 8 yards last year. A guy that, if you'll remember back when Tom Bragg was on the show, a guy he talked about, Shadid Ahmed, had a huge spring game, opened a lot of eyes. 6 foot, 172-pounder sophomore, just 6 catches for 38 yards last year, no touchdowns, but maybe he's one of those guys poised to make that leap. He's had a good spring. If he has a good summer camp, he could be the next real weapon for Grant Wells. Caleb McMillan, another big body type guy that you'd like to see make a leap, 6'3", 215 pounds, red shirt sophomore. You seeing the theme here, Trace? Also just 1 catch for 8 yards. And then, of course, I mentioned Scarcelli, 6'1", 198, a redshirt junior. Then you got 2 guys I'm going to talk about, and then we'll talk about this initial group. Timothy Allen, a junior, 6 foot, 180 pounds, didn't make a catch last year. And Jack Stakem, 5'11", 175 pound sophomore, did not make a catch last year. So all these guys that we just talked about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, half of the roster at wide receiver, 6 of those 8 made a catch in a Herd uniform last year from a wide receiver position. That's basically it. It's Willie Johnson, Stone Scarcelli, and then a bunch of sophomores. So you can see there's a lot of youth on this this wide receiver unit. And we haven't even talked about the incoming freshmen yet. So about these guys here, who do the usual suspects, Gaines, Johnson, Keaton, and maybe Ahmed look to be your top 4. What do you think about this initial 8 guys, the guys returning that have made a catch in a Herd uniform?
Well, it's definitely interesting. It's definitely an interesting predicament to be in. I mean, after the top 3 or so guys, you're gonna have to really pay attention to some of these younger guys and see who really steps up, because nobody really knows much about them. I mean, they just limited, like you said, reading through those stats, very limited stats from these guys. So I mean, that's another big factor in the whole situation of Brock Thompson and Artie Henry being gone is who they're going to replace them with. I mean, because we always said that they got some guys there, they got some talent, but like some of those younger guys, which there's a lot of younger guys, even the top guys are younger guys, really. But the really younger guys that have limited experience, I mean, they're going to have to rise up quick. I mean, you can't just have the same 3 receivers every single time. I mean, you're going to have to have some depth there, especially if one of them goes down or something. So, yeah, it's an interesting situation to be in, but I feel like it'll work out pretty well for them, because I mean, anytime this is when when guys' numbers are called, they step up and somebody steps up usually. So that's what I'm hoping to see here. I mean, it's definitely not a situation of not having talent. It's just a matter of can the guys can they take a big leap from being basically non-existent to a factor? That's the question we all got to see.
Well, that's what's making me scratch my head a little bit, is because this unit is ranked tied for first in Conference USA, and your third leading receiver from a wide receiver standpoint, just wide receivers, had 17 catches last year.
Right.
That's the third highest on the team.
Yeah.
So that's returning. So that's the potential there. It must be off the charts. Now, of course, we've yet to talk about Xavier Gaines, who was the second leading receiver on the team from the tight end position. So, you got to, you guys are just completely forgetting about this tight end unit. Yeah, well, not yet, but we're just talking about wide receivers. And, while we know that Xavier Gaines is vastly talented, who we believe is the single largest mismatch in the entire conference, all that notwithstanding, you still can't have just 3 wide receivers with double-digit catches on your roster. Somebody, 2-3 more guys has to stand up and do something. Now, we mentioned the transfer earlier, Jaden Harrison coming over from Vanderbilt, a 5'11", 193-pound, also sophomore. Just 8 catches for 20 yards in 8 games in 2020 for Vanderbilt. So this is a real difference from what we see from Western Kentucky. I don't know if you had an opportunity to listen to that episode yet, Trace, but Western Kentucky transferred in over 5,000 career receiving yards just in the portal. Not to mention the guys that are already there. Over 5,000 career receiving yards.
That's a
came
lot.
to Bowling Green. Yeah, that's a lot. And you're talking about the one guy that comes over from Marshall has 20 career receiving yards. Now look, take it for what it's worth. They're of course, yes, Western transferred in like 6 guys.
Yeah.
But still, 3 of them were like 1,000-yard receivers. So, there was a definite difference in philosophy here as far as the transfer portal goes with this position group. Just keep that in mind. That boggled my mind. 5,000 career receiving yards transferred into Bowling Green, Kentucky. It's going to be a new look offense. So look, that's the lone transfer. Now let's talk about this group of 6 incoming freshmen. We're going to bookend this with some guys who could really be that come out of nowhere type player as a true freshman, okay, or a redshirt freshman. I think there's only one redshirt freshman. The rest of them are true freshmen. Starting off with Charles Montgomery, a 5'11", 190-pound freshman. 179-pound freshman. Highly recruited. All the big sites or whatever thought that he was going to go to the Gators. He's a Florida kid. Had offer from Alabama as well. Somehow ends up at Marshall for whatever reason. But he's a guy that I think could be that missing link that could provide the spark that, Herd fans need right now, and this offense needs. Ethan Hahn, a 5'8", 175-pound redshirt freshman. Miles Williams, nice big body, 6'3", 200-pound freshman. EJ Horton, 6', 175-pound freshman. I remember when he committed, seemed to be really, really happy about that. He's coming over from a prep academy, Palmetto. It's either Palmetto Prep or Palmetto Academy, whatever. Playmaking ability there, Trace. Ethan Parsons, 6'3", 175 pounds. So you're bringing in some youth with some height, a couple of 6'3" guys. And then the last guy, freshman on the roster, is Caleb Coombs, 5'11", 184-pound freshman, also recruited by Alabama. And I'm going to throw you an interesting note. I think I have an absolute idea of how he ended up at Marshall. His primary recruiter at Alabama, take a guess. Charles Huff. So Huff gets the job at Marshall, says, hey, I like you. Won't you come on with us here? And if I'm not mistaken, he might have been the first commit for Marshall in the Huff era. He might have been Huff's first guy. But anyway, those two guys, Charles Montgomery, Caleb Coombs, might be the guys you want to really pay attention to. They may have big roles as freshmen in this Herd offense if it's a little bit more wide open, or if a guy gets dinged up and somebody's thrust into action. Trace, what do you think about these, the freshmen, I guess? I mean, we don't know anything about them, but there's a mix of height, there's a mix of speed, there's a mix of, you don't want to talk about star ratings and all that stuff, because stars fly out the window as soon as you get popped in the mouth. Mm-hmm. And it's, can you beat the guy in front of you? So 6 guys, what do you think?
Well, you had all those measurables right there are very impressive. I mean, 6, a lot of height and size there with those guys, and that's always good in a receiver. But yeah, I'm really looking at Caleb Coombs a lot, just because just a super highly touted guy. Heck, Phil still has him listed on here as a starter. So yeah. I mean that's just him doing it. Like, we don't know if that's the case or not, but like, as a freshman coming in immediately already listed as a starter, that's got to be pretty telling. And yeah, I think that's definitely Huff. That's all Huff. That's it's got his fingerprints written all over it. That's got his fingerprints all over it. But I think he could be like, Marshall's had a lot of success in the past with freshman receivers. A couple names we all know, but we won't. I mean, I don't know if he'll make that big of an impression right off the bat, but I would not be surprised at all if he's like all freshman team or something like that with Conference USA, if he's thrust into action and gets a lot of reps or whatever. But a lot of potential there. They got some it's a lot of young talent there that I'd like to really see get a chance at some point.
Yeah, you got to feel good about these two guys, Montgomery and Coombs in particular.
Yeah.
Seeing as how they mix in with, Corey Gammage, Johnson, Talit Keaton, Shadid Ahmed, we'll see what this could be a really burn 'em up type speedster offense. And you got guys on the outside that can just take the top off and start lighting up the scoreboard. We'll see how it goes. But look, let's switch gears now. Let's talk about one of the more solid position groups over the past, golly, it's been a while. I mean, Marshall's had solid tight end units for a long time, it seems like. And there's really been no significant drop-off in production and talent in a long time. And this year's no different. Of course, it's Xavier Gaines and then kind of everybody else, at least from a numbers standpoint. But if you've been a fan of Marshall, you know what some of these other guys are bringing to the table anyway. So let's talk about him. Xavier Gaines, I mean, you could do a whole podcast episode on this guy and what he can do really, really well. 6'3", 216-pound red shirt senior. I can't believe we've been making jabs at Willie Johnson being here forever. Xavier Gaines is also a redshirt senior.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't seem like he's been there that long. 28 catches last year, 404 yards, just a nip behind Corey Gammage, had 409. 4 touchdowns for Gaines as well, 14.4 yards per carry. I'm not even talking about how many rushing yards he had and stuff like that. Devin Miller, 6'3", 224-pound redshirt junior, 6 catches last year, 70 yards, no touchdowns, good for 11.7 yards per reception. Garrett Morrell, the one-time quarterback for the Marshall Thundering Herd, once upon a time had to match up against one former Heisman Trophy winner, current NFL quarterback, Lamar Jackson.
NFL MVP.
NFL MVP, yeah. So Garrett Morrell, now the converted tight end, has been playing tight end for a couple years now. 6'3", 241-pound red shirt senior. 2 catches last year for 47 yards. Did find the end zone once. How about that yard per catch average, though? 23.5 yards per catch. 2 more guys on the roster that had a catch in a Herd uniform. Hayden Hagler back again, 6'4", 222-pound sophomore. 2 catches for 6 yards, 1 touchdown. And Amir Richardson, 6'2", 226-pound redshirt freshman, 2 catches, 6 yards, 1 touchdown. The last 2 guys mirror image stats: 2 catches, 6 yards, 1 touchdown apiece. 2 other tight ends on the roster: Jacob Kirkendall, 6'5", 254-pound redshirt junior. Did not appear in a game in 2020. Had 1 game that he appeared in 2019. And then Cooper Tunnel, 6'5", 220-pound freshman. Of course, hasn't appeared in a game yet. Only 1 freshman. Lots of upperclassmen there in the tight end unit. Senior, junior, senior, sophomore, freshman, junior, freshman. The tight end unit. One note I ought to say about, a couple notes actually about Xavier Gaines. Lands on Phil Steele's first team all-conference preseason team. And the weird note, he doesn't make Phil Steele's list of top draftable tight ends, but he's number 7 on Phil Steele's draftable fullbacks.
Wow.
So whatever that means. Okay, but it is what it is. The tight end unit. What do you think, Trace?
I think it's definitely one of the more secure units heading into the season, to be honest. I mean, I think it's a really good unit. I mean, a lot of guys, even the guys with some more limited stats, like those are names that people know. Like those are names that have been around for a while, and like I feel like there's a lot of familiarity there. And a lot of those guys I'd like to see. I think they'll have bigger years. I mean, Hagler. I mean, yeah, he had that touchdown in the 75 game. That was cool to see. I remember that well. Of course, Gaines is just a mismatch all over the field. Doesn't matter where you put him, he's going to make plays. And he's just one of the best all-around players Marshall's probably ever had. And I mean, Devin Miller a couple years ago, he played a lot of football a couple years ago. Last year didn't have nearly as not as many reps or whatever. But I wouldn't be surprised if he has a lot again. So this is a very stout unit in my opinion. I mean, I don't remember what Phil Steele ranked them. What'd you say does he rank tight ends or just receivers?
It's together. It's the
together.
Receiving unit. Yeah.
Okay, that probably had a lot
So
to do
this
with
is why they're 1, because the tight
yeah.
ends are so strong. That's what I was saying before. There's a lot of speculation around wide receivers and the potential, but the tight end unit is solid. So that's definitely pushing that ranking up toward number 1.
That's what I was going to say. Definitely. I mean, if it wasn't for that, there's no way it'd be number 1. But this is a good unit, no doubt.
Yeah, let's talk about Devin Miller there for a second. He's the type of guy. Now, look, you say the numbers are down from last year. Yeah, well, there's a reason for that. He only appeared in 6 games last year, so I'm sure he was battling a little bit of an injury bug. But that's a guy in particular that if he sees an increased role, let's say Gaines gets dinged up in the first half of a game, and they're like, look, we're going to take it easy. We're just going to set him the rest of the game. And then all of a sudden, Devin Miller has to go for 3 quarters. Herd fans, I don't think by and large are going to be like, oh no, we're in trouble at tight end now, because Devin Miller has played a lot of football, and they're like, okay, well, he's very capable. He's made plays for us in the past. He can catch the ball. He can block well. So though the stats aren't there necessarily from a year ago, I feel like a lot of Herd fans would be comfortable with seeing him have an increased role or have to pick up some extra slack. Morrell has played sparingly at tight end, but he's still a guy that can make a play for you. That's evident by his 2 catches for 47 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, his number may not get called a lot, but when it is, boy, it's like he's the distraction, or it's like he's the decoy that will burn you 2 or 3 times a year. Nobody's expecting him to get the ball, so when they call his number, he can make the play, and then, damn, it's a 25-yard gain,
Big body, good blocking tight end.
Yeah, definite. 241 pounds is hard to shake. So, if he gets his hands on you, he's going to help open a running lane. He's going to be, and that's why I think he's a good decoy, because you're expecting him to block, and then all of a sudden you get a quick release off the block, and bam, he's open and nobody else is on him. Hagler, I think, is in a good position to make a leap this year. He showed what he could do. It's hard to bust on the field as a freshman. It just is. and he got in a situational ball there, and he got in, and they happened to call his number, and he made the play, and it was a touchdown. So, good for him. Richardson's another guy that I think could make a leap. He saw a lot of action when Luke Zaban was in the game, late in games. And nice big frame, 6'2", 226. I mean, you like that. So both of those younger guys, I think, you're not going to see them both have 2 catches this year. I think, maybe they'll be up around 10 catches apiece or something like that. So the tight end unit's definitely in good shape. Let's put it that way. It's in really good shape. So look, let's talk about the questions here. Who are you most excited to see out of all if you want to tackle a wide receiver and a tight end, that's fine. If there's one, I don't care, whatever you want to do. So who are you most excited to see out of these units?
Yeah, I guess I'll probably just do one each. Out of the receivers, I'm most excited to see Corey Gamage because, we're talking about guys taking leaps and stuff and, hoping to take leaps. If Corey Gamage takes a leap, that's bad news for Conference USA because he's going to do some work. I mean, if he takes the jump this year, it's going to be tough on those defenses because this guy is no joke. Extremely talented guy. He's almost like, sort of like almost tight end size, but like he's just quick and he just so many times last year he would just out jump you for a touchdown or out jump you. I mean, it's just you can't. Well, I mean, how are you going to? You can't defend that. So if he can keep going, oh man, it's going to be like big time for the receiving unit. I mean, it's going to be kind of like, Tyree Brady or somebody like that, like one of those type years I think he could have. So I'm really looking forward to him. And then tight ends, I mean, how can you not say Xavier Gaines? I mean, everybody wants to see Xavier Gaines on the field. Heck, I've been saying for 4 years, I want to see him on the field more. I want to see more. Yeah. I mean, just giving the ball every other play, I wouldn't care at all. But, yeah, I mean, what else can you say about Xavier Gaines? You got to be excited to see him.
Yeah, and those are my 2 guys exactly. Let me give you just a tidbit. Corey Gamage leads the herd in receiving yards last year, and he only appeared in 9 games. So if you can see that, extrapolate for a full season. If you get a full season of games out of him, automatically you got to think you're going to see an increase in production automatically. And one note from his freshman year or his first year to his, to last year, his stats tripled. He had 13 catches his first year, 35 catches last year, just over 150 yards his first year. What'd I say? 409 last year, 1 touchdown a couple of years ago, 4 last year. So there's been a little bit of a rise. So let's see if that can keep up. And if those numbers double, if you're looking at 70 catches for 800 yards, I mean, you'd like to have a little bit more than 8 touchdowns, but I think any Herd fan would take 70 catches for 800 yards from one wide receiver, when you barely got that from your top receivers last year combined.
Yep.
And Xavier Gaines, I mean, what more do you want the guy to do? I'd like to see him complete the trifecta this year. I'd like to see him pass for a touchdown, run for a touchdown, and catch a touchdown in the same game. That'd be pretty sweet. But other than that, I mean, what has the guy not done that you need to see him do? He's a phenomenal player, and I'm glad to get to watch him for one more year. Who's the biggest loss from the unit, Trace, from a year ago?
Well, it's obviously between the 2 we've already mentioned, but like that, I would say probably R.D. Henry, just because I feel like he was a really good kind of leader, like a really good kind of locker room guy. I mean, I'm not saying Brock Thompson wasn't, but like I just feel like I've seen a lot of things on social media regarding R.D. Henry that's very positive for him. So like I feel like that he's going to be missed in that regard. That's kind of like a veteran leader type deal. But I mean, yeah, he was a good player. I mean, he was a good player for sure. I mean, a really talented guy. And, when he wasn't hurt or, he did miss quite a bit of time with injury, which sucked because, I mean, we didn't quite get to see what he could do, 100% healthy the whole year. But, yeah, I think it's really either of those guys. But I feel like just because of R.D. Henry's kind of veteran status and, like, I feel like he was a well-respected guy in the locker room. I feel like that's a, kind of puts him over the top a little bit. So I'd go with R.D. Henry.
I mean, I can't disagree with you for those reasons, but that's not who I feel is the biggest. I feel Brock Thompson's the biggest loss just because he had the more consistent big play ability. He made more clutch plays, already made a lot of plays, but he just couldn't stay. Neither one of them could really stay healthy. So, it's kind of a moot point, honestly. But I feel like Thompson had the bigger upside. He had more time left to play. I feel like that he and Wells had a little bit better of a chemistry together. You could see that Wells was making more passes, making more completions for more yardage when Thompson was available to play. So I just feel like from a play standpoint, Thompson's the biggest loss. I really don't worry too much about the locker room stuff because I feel like some of the guys that we've talked about already, namely guys like Willie Johnson and Xavier Gaines, who are redshirt seniors, who this is their last go round with the Herd. They haven't captured that title. I feel like they're kind of leading the way with the approach to work and come to work every day. And, and a lot of that goes in with a new coaching staff as well. These guys are hungry and we've seen the attention to detail, especially just, on social media and things like that. It's a new day at Marshall. So I just think Brock Thompson from a production standpoint and a upside standpoint was the biggest loss. Who's your breakout player or players from this, from these units?
Yeah, it could be really any of those tight ends that we mentioned. I mean, even to an extent, it could be Xavier Gaines because I'm not saying I'm not picking him, but I'm saying it really could be. But in my opinion, I think the breakout guy is the guy that we've mentioned and the guy that we talked about earlier with Tom Bragg when he was on Shadid Ahmed. I think he's going to have a breakout year, and we saw him last year. I remember even the year before. I think like he made some plays. Like, it wasn't like he was not getting in there. He doesn't have an overabundance of stats, but I really think that he's a good player. He kind of reminds me of kind of like a slot receiver type deal. Not necessarily the biggest guy out there. Kind of like Tommy Schuler, I guess, in that regard. But like, a guy you can put in the slot probably. And he can go out there and make a lot of plays, just, 5 to 10 yard routes, just live in that area, live in that territory, just make catches. I feel like that could be his role. And Marshall really honestly needs a guy like that. They need like some production out of the slot because, when you're having to put tight ends in the slot, you're really not finding a whole lot of success there. So I'd like to see Shadid Ahmed be the breakout guy. And I think he could be that and probably will be that.
Well, I hate to say that, I don't want to say Corey Gammage is going to be the breakout guy because I feel like he has to, I feel like he has to for this offense to be as efficient and as potent as we hope it can be or think it may be. So that's almost like a foregone conclusion. He's got to be that 600, 700 yard receiver, finding the end zone almost 10 times. It's got to be that way. So I think the breakout wide receiver, from a wide receiver standpoint, I think it's going to be Talit Keaton. 17 catches last year, 175 yards. We know that he's got the moves to get free once he's in space. You see that with the punt returning and all that kind of stuff. So I think he's poised to be that weapon opposite of Corey Gammage to be, and maybe he breaks out because Gammage is, bringing so much attention to his half of the field. Now, all of a sudden there's opportunities there, one-on-one balls or whatever for Keaton to go up and get. And if he can get, his share of those, if he can get 2/3 of those, he's going to have a big year. And if those safeties start cheating over to Keaton because he's been strong the past few games, well, that just opens up Corey Gammage. And if both of those guys there's only so many defenders, you can't double team everybody. Somebody's going to be open if you're double teaming somebody. So, that's why I feel like Keaton could break out in a big way because Gammage is so big and so dangerous and so potentially lethal. The opportunities just might be there for him to break out. How about the MVP? When it's all said and done, the patented KD saying, when it's all said and done and you come up for air after the dust settles, who's the MVP of the unit?
Well, I think you got to go with, wide receivers or tight ends. I think you got to go with Xavier Gaines. I think, this guy, this is his last year for sure at Marshall. Like, this is it. Like, he wouldn't even have been back if it wasn't for COVID. So this is the year. This is his last. This is the final hoorah, so to speak. I mean, I think it's going to be a huge year for him. He's had several really good years. I mean, obviously, just such a well thought of, well respected player. I mean, nationally, like he makes a lot of kind of headlines nationally. I mean, headlines might not be the right word, but he gets national attention, put it that way, from like different things. And the guy's really good. I mean, I can definitely see him playing in the NFL. In my opinion, he's an NFL player. I don't know what position you want to put him at, but he's an NFL player. He's an NFL athlete. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. And if he plays, a full year and plays really well and goes out there and puts up big numbers, he's going to be drafted. I mean, he's just an athlete. I mean, everybody knew that when he came out of high school with, a dozen friggin' SEC and Big Ten offers at quarterback. I mean, he was an athlete. Like, he's just going to make plays no matter where you put him, and that's what he's done at Marshall. So that's my MVP of the unit right there.
Yeah, I have to agree. As much as I want to see Gamage have career year, as much as I would like to see all these guys have a career year, I'd like to see Willie Johnson have his best year ever. He's been here so long.
Yeah,
he's battled adversity. He's made plays. He's played his role. As much as I would like him to have a career year, which he very well could do, I think when it's all said and done, Xavier Gaines is going to be the MVP of the entire receiving unit. I think he is just, it's my last go around in the Kelly green and white. I want to get it for all I can get. He's probably thinking to himself, I want to have career highs in catches, yards, touchdowns, yada, yada, yada. And looking back over his stats, every year he's gotten higher numbers. He's posted higher numbers in the receiving game, higher numbers, whether they just be meager or, quite a big jump. Every single major category, receptions, yards, and touchdowns, he's posted a better year than the previous year.
Yeah.
So why would you expect that to be any different coming into his final year in Kelly green and white? All right. What's the hot take for the receiving unit, Trace?
Well, the hot take, I'm going to combine receivers and tight ends with this one. But my hot take is Marshall at the end of the year, after the dust has settled, will have a first-team wide receiver and tight end.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that probably hasn't happened since Cato, probably. Obviously it hasn't happened since Cato. It might not even happen with Cato. I can't remember. But that's my hot take. I think Gamage is going to be first team, and I think Gaines will be first team. So
wow.
That's what I'm rolling with. And if that happens, good things are going to happen for the Marshall offense this year.
Wow, I thought you were going to go with the third there and give me a one on the all freshman team too.
One too. We'll go with that one too.
That one too. Yeah, look, I've been throwing around some fairly weak, let me say, hot takes. They've been like lukewarm takes throughout this whole series. But I'm going to say for the first time in a long time, Marshall has a 1,000-yard receiver.
Wow.
I don't know that who that will be. Could be any one of the guys, but I think Marshall's going to have a 1,000-yard receiver, and I think Xavier Gaines is going to have over 800 yards of offense, receiving and rushing. So that's my hotter of a take. It's not so lukewarm. It's like kind of hot. Not boiling though. Look, one thing we got to talk about, Trace, that has happened since we've recorded last is there's a major factor that is going to play into all the success of these guys now. And that's the fact there's a big shakeup along the Marshall offensive line.
Sure.
Just the other day, North Carolina transfer offensive lineman, local Huntington kid Billy Ross, who was penciled in as a starter along the Herd offensive line, who we both thought was going to be a starter as well, announced that he's retiring from football for personal reasons. Now, whatever that means, Billy's hanging him up, and we wish him the best.
Yep.
But that leaves a big question mark now along the Herd offensive line. Now, look, we think for sure that they are set still at 3 positions. We said it in the episode, but now who's going to be the 5th guy now that Ross isn't the 4th guy? So something to keep an eye on. We'll see who comes out of the pack. It's still not too late if they're going to try to add somebody in the portal. I have not gone and looked and seen like who's still out there, who's still available. And I don't even know if that's something they want to entertain doing.
Yeah.
But that was a big shakeup. We figured Billy Ross was going to step in and take the place of either Kane Madden or a Josh Ball, and now somebody's got to step in and take the place of one of those two guys and fill the hole that is now vacated by Billy Ross. So something to keep an eye on as far as the Herd offense goes, because we all know it starts with the offensive line. But that's just big news. Can't believe that that broke. That was kind of out of left field. But hey, we wish Billy the best, and let's hope the Herd can find a hole or fill the hole in the offensive line. Trace, what do you got for final thoughts this week?
Yeah, I mean, wide receivers and tight ends this year are very interesting units. I mean, every year I feel like we always are talking about the receivers needing to step up. I feel like that's been a reoccurring theme over the last 2-3 years. We need to see the receiver step up, this and that. You know, it's usually one guy or two guys, but not the overall unit. Same thing again this year. Like, we need to see the overall unit step up. I mean, especially with Grant Wells, you know, at the rocky finish he had the end of last year, and you know, still a young quarterback, and you need guys, you need receivers to help bail out your quarterback sometimes, and you know that it hasn't always been the case, and that's been a big reason why the tight ends have had so much success over the last couple of years, is because they've had to have success because the receivers haven't been stepping up. I mean, I remember like 2019, I couldn't remember what the numbers were, but the numbers for the receivers they were really bad. I mean, it was almost non-existent. I wouldn't say non-existent, but it was extremely low numbers for the receiving unit that year. I mean, I have it written down somewhere, but I mean, it was not impressive at all. Last year it got better. It did. I mean, Corey Gamage stepped up. You know, Grant Wells had a better year than Isaiah Green did a couple years ago. So, I mean, Wells played better and receivers got better a little bit last year, no doubt about it. But we still need to see more consistency. I mean, tight ends, I think, are fine. I think they got 3 or 4 guys there that you can count on. Receivers, I think they have about 3 guys that you can probably count on. And you need 5. So
you need more than 5.
You need at least 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, But I think for the most part, I mean, Phil still thinks pretty highly of the unit, even though they did lose a couple of guys. So I think they'll be all right. And, you know, I think that'll help out Grant Wells and that'll help out the offense. And I think whatever new system or new scheme they run offensively will probably help too. So I think that they'll have a good year.
What I would like to be able to do is, for one time when we talk about Marshall wide receivers, to be able to not have to say they'll be fine. What I'd really like to be able to do is go, this unit is loaded.
This unit is stacked.
Like we talk about with the offensive line. We never have to say, well, they'll be fine. We always say they're solid again. They're going to be really good. It's a strength of the team and yada, yada, yada. And I would, for one time, it seems like, I don't know if we've ever been able to do that since we've been doing this podcast, Trace, to do a position group breakdown and do the right wide receivers and go, they're stacked. They're good. Yep. They're solid. You know, we may have talked more positively about them when guys like Tyree Brady were there and Armani Levias and guys like that were there, because they were a little bit more solidified. And this year, it boggles my mind a little bit that they are tied for first in Conference USA, according to Phil Steele, 51st nationally. And you talk about returning 2 wide receiver or a wide receiver and a tight end that both barely had over 400 yards receiving last year. It's kind of head scratching, but again, we think that there's going to be a different style of offense run. It's going to be a little bit more wide open. It's going to be a little bit more, pass friendly. It's going to be a little bit more creative and some tempo and things like that. So the opportunity to put up those numbers will be there. But as bad as I want to say it, I'm going to say it. Marshall's probably going to be okay at wide receiver. They're going to be above average at tight end. As long as Xavier Gaines is on your roster, you're definitely above average. As a unit from top to bottom, they're going to be above average because it's Xavier Gaines, and then somebody else is going to have to step up and be a consistent player. Devin Miller had a better 2019 than he did in 2020. The same amount of games in both years, 6. So He's going to have to get 9-10 games in. He's going to have to get 20-25 catches. He's going to have to, play a bigger role. Wide receiver is just going to have to be. Who's it going to be? Who's going to be the weapon that we physically it's got to be Corey Gammage you don't want to line up against. You're going to have to put your fastest defensive back probably on Talit Keaton and Willie Johnson or whatever you want to do because they're just fast. So we just need to see production. And I'm tired of saying we need to see production. I just want to see the production so that we can talk about what happened. So anyway, we're going to come back, I don't know, maybe later or next week. And it looks like we're ready to talk about some defense, Trace. Trace will let me know who we're talking about next time. But the offense is done with. It's time to start talking about some defense. So until we come back to you, Trace, take us out of here.
Go Herds.
Go Tops. It's a Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Later. It doesn't want to end.
Yeah, it just liked it.
I mean, it's not in. There we go.